In this After Effects tutorial, I'm going to show you one line of code that can speed up your After Effects workflow by up to 300%. So I'm in a fresh composition here, and I've just recently cleared the cache. So this should be rendering as though it's just been created. Now this scene here, if we look at this render time, we can see that this current frame alone is taking 1.52 seconds to render. Now there's lots of effects applied to this. We've got camera lens blur, glow, shadows underneath the characters, things like that. And as you can see, just sort of clicking through the timeline is quite sluggish and quite slow. And if we tried to render this, once it reaches the end of that green line, which is already pre-rendered, you can see it's getting really slow and really sluggish. But what happens if we click this button here, this effects controller? So what this is going to do is going to turn off every effect that is not absolutely necessary to be, in the workflow. So let's click that. And as you can see, it turns off everything. Now, granted, this doesn't look great at the minute, but obviously just when you're working around in After Effects, we don't need all them effects applied. What you can do is turn them off whilst you're working and turn it back on while you're rendering. So if you look at this time here, this frame is going to take 646 milliseconds, whereas if we turn the effects back on and let it refresh, that's now gone up to 3.1 seconds. And this is just having one composition in the timeline. So if you can imagine, if you're doing a 1 or 2 minute animation, you could probably have up to 20 of these, and it really just starts to add up. So if we turn it back off again, you can see it goes back down to 646. So let's take a look at how to set this up and get going. So this is all controlled by this single line of code. And let's take a deeper dive into what this code actually means and what each part of it is representing. So this part here is the main composition. This is the composition that you're going to be rendering to render out the final animation. This part here represents the layer, and the layer that we're going to apply this to is an adjustment layer. This part here represents the effect, and the effect that we're going to apply this to is a checkbox controller. And this part here represents the value. This can be anything from 0 to a positive number. This is what's going to tell the effect whether to be on, off, and to what value. For example, 0 is off, 100 is on, and if you're applying this to a blur effect or a glow effect, this positive number will represent the amount. So I'm here in a completely fresh project, completely fresh composition. So let's start adding some elements to this and adding some quite render intensive effects to it. We have the shape in Z space, we have camera lens blur, and we have camera lens blur and deep glow. So let's go in now and add the checkbox control. Let's see if we can start speeding this up. So the first thing we need to do is add in an adjustment layer. Okay, and we need to call this adjustment layer something that we'll remember. So I like to call my effects controller. On the effects controller, we want to add a checkbox control. And again, you can call this whatever you like. You do need to remember it though. So again, I like to call it effects controller. Keep it simple. Now, there's 3 things that we need to remember when writing this expression. We need to remember the main composition where the adjustment layer / effects control is being put. So in this case, it's the main render. I like to put it in the main composition where you're going to be doing the final render from. We need to remember the name of the adjustment layer, and we also need to remember the name of the checkbox control. So let's go in now and start adding this expression to start speeding it up. Now, I like to keep it unchecked at this point, so you know if the effect has been turned on or off. So we will start with the camera lens blur. Now, unfortunately, you can't do it. Yes, you can. So if you alt-click on this stopwatch here, it'll bring up the expression box here. Now you can see we've got it currently applied to 150% or pixels, which is good to remember. So if we apply that expression here, what that's saying is if the main composition, the layer effects controller, the effects control checkbox is checked, it'll be if it's unchecked, it'll be 0%, so 0% on the radius, if not 100. So let's change that to 150, and that'll turn it off. Now it hasn't deleted the effect, it's just been turned off. So let's go through and add it to the other ones. So we've got into effects, we've got camera lens blur, so let's add it to that one. Again, changing it to 150. But on this one, we also have deep glow. Now, the radius to this is set to 500, so remember that value. Alt or Option click, paste it in, and we'll change that to 500. Okay, that's been turned off. Now on this one, there's no effects applied to this one because it's, there's no effects applied to this one. And the way we've got it blurred is due to the focal distance of the camera. So what we can do, which is going to speed up massively, is we can actually turn on or off the depth of field on the camera. So in the example scene that we saw, you know, the assets in the background were out of focus and just the characters were in focus. And the reason for that is the background assets were further back in Z space. So let's apply this to the depth of field of the camera. Now, what you want to do for this is leave this at 0 and 100, and what that means is either on or off. So let's apply it to that, and you can see it's the green circle is now out of focus. So we look at the render time frame here, we're at 5 milliseconds, and that's because this effects controller is turned off. So let's turn it back on to apply all the effects. As you can see, it's now got up to 9 milliseconds. Now, this isn't a lot of time difference, but we've only got 3 elements here with, you know, one or two effects applied to each of them. But if you can imagine, this is across an entire animation, maybe it's 2 minutes long. This is going to really change the render time. So let's add a little bit of basic animation to these and see how this changes this render time here. You can see quite choppy by looking at the playhead here, quite choppy and not as smooth. So let's clear the cache. So we're starting from scratch again. You really don't need to do this. This is just an example, and turn that off. You can see now that's much smoother. And then when it comes to rendering, you know, the animation, we can quickly turn this back on. It depends on how long the animation is and how many compositions you've got going. It might take a little time to turn it on and off. But when you're working around, keep it turned off. It's nice and smooth. Then when you're ready to render, turn it back on. So what if we wanted to control the opacity? Not the opacity, sorry. What if we wanted to control the amount of glow or the amount of blur or anything you've applied this effect to? So it might be opacity or anything like that. So if we double click E, it'll bring up these expressions. Now, obviously, we can't change this because this is being driven by this expression here. So let's say, for example, let's just delete that. Let's say, for example, we wanted to keyframe this blur, so maybe you put it 150. Let's say we wanted to keyframe it from 150 to 0, and let's also delete the deep glow so we can see what we're looking at. Okay, well, we can't do that because, like I said, this number is being controlled by this expression here. So what we can do, on top of adding this expression, let's add a slider control to this layer. Okay, and what we'll do is we'll copy this number into here for now. So let's put 100. Okay, so what we can now do is link this number to this slider control. So if we highlight the 100 or whatever you've got it set to, and click and hold this pick whip here and drag it up to this slider control. So this makes the expression even longer, but what we now have is we can control this with a slider control. Okay, so what we could now do is keyframe the camera lens blur from 100. That adds a keyframe, and now we can drag it down to 0. Again, with the effect being controlled by this effects controller here. So that is how you would control a a numerical value with a slider control, whilst also keeping the checkbox control expression live and active. When I first started using this script, I just used to have the script copied and pasted onto a note, which I just left open at the side of After Effects. But I thought there must be an easier way. So what I did with the help of some AI is I wrote a custom script so that I could run this via KBAR, and I'll put a link to download this script in the description. So all I need to do is click on the property that I want to add this to. So let's say opacity. I could click that to a specific layer, and if I hover over this KBAR button here, you can see it says add FX controls. If I click that, it just automatically adds it straight away, so there's no need to sort of copy and paste code. And I could just go in and edit this. So this just basically adds 0 to 100, so I can go in and change that if I needed to. So I could put 70 or anything like that.